Hey there, James Davis here from DFSR.com, and today I'm excited to talk to you about creating good cash game lineups in NBA DFS. Now, creating cash game lineups in the NBA I find to be quite a bit easier than the other major US sports for one reason. The prioritizing safety is actually a lot easier than it sounds on its face. Now, how do we do this? Well, the key thing in NBA is projecting opportunity, and I mean that in two different ways. The first is the minutes that a player is going to play. We've found that assuming all other things are equal, an equal matchup, and equal teammates on the court, that a player will do pretty much the same thing in 15 minutes on the court as 25 minutes on the court. And oftentimes, lineups are so close to one another that really projecting accurately how many minutes a player is going to play can be the difference between winning and losing. And this means that here at DFSR, on an every night basis, we go every player in the NBA who's going to play on the next day and try to predict accurately how many minutes they're going to play. Now, for a team that's not suffering any injuries or starting lineup changes, rest days, things like that, projecting minutes can be pretty straightforward. You can pretty much just look at what the player's done. But the real secret comes down to trying to project how those minutes are going to be reapportioned when a player is going to sit. Now, this is something we'll talk about more in a later Bootcamp video here, but it really is a fundamental question. The other big piece of opportunity comes down to projecting how one player being out of the lineup or multiple players being out of the lineup is going to affect the opportunity and performance of the other players. So in some cases, it's quite obvious and profound. Russell Westbrook leaving the Thunder this year in 2019, if you're watching the video then, is a pretty significant difference. Not only is that a lot of minutes to be redistributed, but it's also a lot of shots, assists, and time of possession. And so at our algorithm, we use tools like NBA Wowie to try to figure out how players perform with certain other teammates on the floor. It's obviously important to do this in the case of a big guy like Westbrook, but it's also important to do it for side pieces, pass first point guard or a really tall guy who gets tons of rebounds. You get the idea. When we're trying to project opportunity, it's not only how many minutes you get, but who shares the court with you. The next question when it comes to prioritizing safety is whether we should stack. Now, there's a common thought that if you stack players from a certain game, you really run the risk of having a bunch of players in one game that doesn't quite get there. Perhaps it's a blowout. Perhaps someone on the team scores all the points and the other players don't have an opportunity to score. For the most part, concerns about stacking when it comes to cash games I find to be largely unfounded. In fact, many times, many players from the same team will all of a sudden become good DFS plays simply because one key player is missing. A good example would be from last year's Raptors team. When Kawhi would sit, immediately you would see guys like Pascal Siakam or Fred VanVleet or Kyle Lowry rocket to the top of our cash game lineups simply because Kawhi was such a gravitational force on that team that opening up all those minutes and opportunity created a great situation for the other players that were priced in roughly the same way. So when it comes to stacking, I suppose you can err on the side of caution when it comes to, say, peak Golden State teams when they're favored by 17 points at home against Phoenix or something. Sure, in cases like that, having all the Golden State guys might expose you to some level of risk, and perhaps you should be trying to figure out which players are more likely to perform well in a blowout. But by and large, I'm not thinking about whether I have too many players on the same team for my cash game lineups. And in fact, in big tournaments, I'm very much prioritizing having players from the same team and the same game. But yeah, for cash games, this is not something I worry very much about. Something I do worry about, on the other hand, is assessing injury risk. Now, in the NBA, this can be extremely difficult for one major reason. The NBA, unlike other sports, will see guys play a variable amount based on how injured they are. So in Major League Baseball, typically you either play or you don't, and if you play, your performance will be pretty much what it is normally, unless it's a specific debilitating injury like a wrist injury. Likewise in the NFL, usually you get enough injury notice from week to week and you have enough options from a slate to slate basis that you don't really need to prioritize a guy who's just returning back from injury. The NBA can be something of a different animal. You could get someone back who's going to play only 20 minutes, or you could hear language like, he's going to test it out in the first quarter and see how it goes. For me, for my cash game lineups, I really try hard not to prioritize guys who haven't had a recent injury history unless they're about 2 games removed from that injury. And the reasons for that are many. The first is that if a player is injured, obviously he could aggravate the injury if he's not back in a suitable time frame. The second is that he will almost always be the first person that's pulled should the game get out of hand. And like we were talking about when it comes to prioritizing safety via projecting minutes, injured guys are the highest candidates to go from, say, 35 minutes a game to 31 minutes a game. Now, that might not sound like that big of a deal, but if you're looking at someone like Giannis or Zion Williamson or one of these guys, if they're going to be scoring, 1.5 fantasy points per minute, all of a sudden you lose 4 minutes and you're talking about a difference of 6 fantasy points, which is very often the difference between cashing and not when it comes to DFS NBA. So when in doubt, leave them out. Cash game lineups, I find DFS cash to be one of the most fun things to do when it comes to playing in the NBA, and I think you will too. So if you don't like the idea of going through the grinder and trying to set these lineups for yourself, you can always use our lineup optimization tool, which, as you can see here, is set for the first slate of the season. Not only can you lock and exclude the players that you like, when you get done with that, you can just do one-click optimization and play whatever lineup we're spitting out as our top lineup of the time. So yeah, that's pretty much as easy as that. And we're always in the members-only chat room at least an hour before lock discussing this stuff as well. So if you want to come make cash game lineups with us, right on. If you just want to use this video to set your own cash game lineups, more power to you. Thanks as always for joining us on the DFSR NBA Bootcamp, and we'll catch you next time.